So I'm back again with another video. Something occurred to me that hadn't occurred to me earlier, and that was to talk about Qvale's 1947 flying saucer sighting and explanation. So I've decided to do that. I know that people watching these videos probably must think to themselves, boy, this Ardeli guy must really love to hear himself speak, but that's not the case. I only speak when I have something important to say, and I actually haven't posted anything on this channel in over 2 years. Yeah, maybe 3 years. I don't know. It's been a long time. But I know there's been a rash of videos, but it's because I've decided that I have things that are important to say and I want to say them. So let's go back to 1947. 1947, in about June 23rd or 24th, the term flying saucer was invented by a pilot flying in Washington State who saw a bunch of strange crafts, he said, that looked like flying discs or something, and that's where the term flying saucer came from. So within 2 weeks and of course this caused a craze across the country. All of a sudden everybody started seeing flying saucers. They were everywhere. And about 2 weeks later, Qvale was apparently in Auburn, California, and he said that I think it was about 2 in the afternoon, sometime in the afternoon, I think. And he looked up and he saw these strange discs in the air. And when they disappeared, when they took off at they hovered there, and then they took off at a terrific speed. And when they disappeared out of the atmosphere as opposed to going over the horizon. And he used his experience as a pilot in World War II to say that he knew everything about airplanes or whatever, and that these were no airplanes. So to me, this is one of the earliest things I discovered about Qvale in my research. And to me, this is very important because this is attention seeking on a grand scale, just like Zodiac did. It's a different type of attention seeking, sure, but it's using this phenomenon of flying saucers as a tool to get attention for himself and possibly for his business, for all I know, from the general public. So the sighting took place on the same day as, I think it was the same day as the Roswell incident in New Mexico, July 5th, a Saturday. So 2 days later, this incident that Qvale reported shows up, and he shows up on the front pages of the Alameda Times-Star. Now, when I spoke to Qvale in 2006, he told me that, well, he waited a few days, and when he didn't see the report of this incident in the newspapers, he decided to call them. Well, that's not how it worked. He went right to the newspapers. He either went to the newspapers that afternoon, and it was too late. He missed the deadline. They didn't have cell phones in those days, so he had to find a phone, maybe late afternoon, early evening. And if he called it in then, it was probably past the time when they could get the article into the Sunday newspaper on the 6th. Either that or he called on the 6th and they put it in on the 7th, but it was definitely in on the front page of the Alameda Times-Star on the 7th. And one of the interesting things about the article is that at the end of the article, and the story was picked up the next day in the San Francisco Examiner on the front page again, and I think the same day on the interior pages of the San Francisco Call Bulletin. So he was in 3 newspapers. But the article in the Examiner didn't contain this last bit that was in the Alameda Times-Star article. And the bit that was in the Alameda Times-Star article was that Qvale said that he wished that these things would have landed and the people would tell us, the people in them, whoever they were, would tell us where they come from. So he was even saying that there were little green men apparently contained in these flying saucers. So he went all out. He got front page publicity in 2 newspapers, one of them a major San Francisco newspaper, and he did so by saying that something that nobody was saying at the time. Now, if you go back to 1947 and you look at all the different accounts, and I looked at a lot of them, nobody is saying that flying saucers are from outer space. They're trying to rationalize them as being some new craft that the Americans had developed, or maybe it was the Russians or the Chinese. But there wasn't anything about flying saucers coming from outer space, because I think people were frankly scared and they didn't want to admit that we may be being invaded from outer space. So they tried to rationalize that these were crafts that were of this earth. But Qvale made no such distinction. And in a book that was written 20 years later in 1967 that summarized the 1947 flying saucer phenomenon, there were, like, I forget now, 200 cases covered or something, and Qvale was the only credible eyewitness who said that flying saucers were from outer space out of 200 accounts that they summarized. Now, there was one other person who said that flying saucers were from outer space, and ironically, where I was working at the time was right near this place called Morristown Airport in New Jersey, northern New Jersey. And this guy said that he was flying a plane and he was surrounded by 3 or 4 flying saucers, and they made his plane levitate and do all these different things. And his account was obviously not credible, and no one took him seriously. So the only really serious, because Qvale used his experience as a military pilot to bolster his claims, the only person who had any credibility who said in 1947 that flying saucers were from outer space in that book was Kjell Qvale. And to me, this is attention seeking on a grand scale, just like Zodiac did. Now, if we jump ahead to 1949, you have another incident that took place where Qvale was sponsoring this hill climb race up the side of Mount Diablo, and he sponsored it on June 26th, 1949. Well, 21 years later, Zodiac himself associates himself with Mount Diablo, with the Mount Diablo letter. So those are Qvale and the Zodiac killer both associated himself with Mount Diablo on June 26th, and I think that that's extremely significant. It isn't a synchronicity, it isn't a coincidence. All these dates that surround Qvale are very telling, like the date his mother died, the date his father was born, and another date was just after midnight on July 5th, 1969, when the shooting at Blue Rock Springs took place. That was the commemoration of the July 5th, 1947 flying saucer incident, the same date. Now, we know that the attack occurred at Blue Rock Springs just after midnight because the one eyewitness, the caretaker's son, said that it was just after midnight on July 5th, not on July 4th, but on July 5th. And that makes the shooting on the same day, and in fact, that could be why Zodiac drove away for a few minutes and came back just after midnight, so it would occur on July 5th. And July 5th was the commemoration of the 1947 flying saucer sighting. So I think that his sighting is very significant. It shows like a prototype Zodiac existing in 1947 with the attention seeking on the front pages of newspapers by saying something bizarre. And Zodiac certainly, his behavior was certainly bizarre in 1968 and 69. So I believe that the 1947 flying saucer sighting is sort of a watershed moment in determining how Qvale evolved from who he was in 1947 to who he became in 1969.